Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Answers from the Lab, where we share Mayo Clinic knowledge and advancements on the state of testing and science from laboratory leaders and the people who are making it happen behind the scenes. I'm Dr. Bobbi Pritt, Interim Chair of the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. With me today is Dr. Bill Morice, the President and CEO of Mayo Clinic Laboratories. This is our weekly discussion with Dr. Morice, in which we learn about updates in the field of laboratory medicine and pathology. Well, hi, Bill. Welcome back.
Hi, Bobbi. Yes, we're in the 12 days of Christmas or holiday season, however you celebrate it, time of year.
I know, it's a wonderful holiday spirit. People their spirits are visibly lifted. There's cookies everywhere. I've eaten far too many of those. So yeah, it's a great time of year.
It is. I mean, and it's no matter what, how you celebrate, I think it is an important time to just really focus on the things that the people around you that you can be, that you have the opportunity to interact with, and all the blessings that each one of us have, and just to be mindful of all the things around us and to celebrate them. So whether it's in nature or people or opportunities or anything else. So yeah, for that reason, it really is one of my favorite times of year. That and of course the Christmas songs.
The Christmas song, yes, which you got to sing for us, and all our listeners are all just missing out on Marshmallow World.
Yeah, or maybe not. Anyway.
Well, I thought this would be a great time, since we're kind of reflecting, is to also just look ahead to 2023. And gosh, it seems like we just did this not that long ago, looking ahead to 2022. I think our predictions were pretty good. So we'll see how well we do with predicting what's going to happen in 2023.
Yeah, although I have to say, I remember it was Professor Tribe, a lawyer from Harvard Medical School, very famous. One time I heard him talking, he said, those who use glass balls or crystal balls to predict the future should be prepared to eat glass, or something along those lines. So you never know, but you're right. Know. It is hard to believe, honestly, as we do this, Bobbi, that this is, we really started doing this weekly when the pandemic struck. And, now it's going to be 3 years ago this coming year, which is kind of mind boggling to think about in that time span. Because on the one hand, it seems like there's been so much that has happened, and the other, it seems like it's all gone so quickly. So, but I do think 2023 is going to be a very pivotal year as we really who knows? I mean, people get very sensitive about saying the pandemic is over, but I think as we continue to normalize to a world with COVID as one of the pathogens that's out there, and all the aftermaths from it. Yeah, I think 2023 is going to be a big year. The first, of course, one of the most important will be in the US in particular, will be the public health emergency, and when that finally is rescinded, and what that will mean.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start. So just a reminder for everyone, it's the federal public health emergency. It's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and they have to either renew or rescind the public health emergency for COVID-19 every 90 days. So they have to keep renewing it if they want to maintain certain healthcare flexibilities, waivers. And this is amazing, Bill. It's been in place since January 27th of 2020. So it's been in place for a long time, and the latest extension is effective through January 11th. But the administration has said that they're going to give us at least a 60-day notice before the public health emergency ends. So if it's due in January 11th, to me, that sounds like they would not be able, it sounds like it's going to have to get renewed again. We'll see.
Yes.
That's how I'm interpreting that. But after that, it's hard to know what'll happen.
Yeah, and I think that, not to get you and I have used this podcast a lot to talk about some of the I don't want to say minutia, but some of the ins and outs of how the government works, the federal government. But I don't think it's by law. I don't think it's a legal requirement for the 60-day notification, but it's something HHS committed to. And just to remind people, there was a public health emergency for monkeypox too, which has been rescinded. And there wasn't a 60-day notice again because it's not a requirement. What a public health emergency does, it gives the HHS authority to do things that normally would have, it allows it to break some of the rules, if you will, to give it more authority to do things that need to be done expeditiously. So a couple of good examples will be some of the changes on who was eligible for Medicaid and I think is one. Medicaid eligibility to get more people covered during the public health emergency, a big one. Another one was for those of us in lab medicine, was a relaxation of needing to have, a CLIA license for anyone that's performing sign-out activities, clinical activities, even in their home. Some of the, particularly digital pathology, there were waivers on some of those, requirements. And virtual health, and that's for us, that's virtual health, but there were a lot of waivers for virtual health and virtual healthcare delivery. And so all those things will, and then last but not least is actually CMS's authority to set the price of the reimbursement rate for COVID testing. So all of those things, once the public health emergency expires, will go away, right? And so that's why it's really important, and that's why the 60-day notice was, because it's going to have big ramifications, not just for labs, but for healthcare across the country and healthcare delivery across the country. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to reflect on that. These are really big things. And I think if the Medicaid funding changes, then people would start being removed from the Medicaid rolls. That would probably leave some people uninsured. So that's a huge change. And then, of course, like you said, the lack of need for independent CLIA waivers or CLIA licenses for practicing off-site, that's going to be a huge one for pathology as well.
Yeah, I agree. And so, just so people, this is the level, also the Medicaid, I think it has to do with how much is being covered by the federal government versus the state. So there's a big impact on state budgets and all those sorts of things. And that's why it's so critical, right? And I think on the one hand, from a more of a conservative viewpoint, there's a real push to get rid of the public health emergency, because it's more about not making the federal government too powerful, the limits and the checks and balances between the power of the federal versus the state government, particularly as it pertains to the practice of medicine. So there's a big push on that side. But on the other, to your point, there's a real push to say, look, a lot of these things were things that we knew needed to be done to advance healthcare in the modern world, and some of them should persist. And so the other thing for people to really watch, again, getting back to this, is what makes it into the end of the year legislative package, particularly as it pertains to virtual health. That's going to be, and also is there going to be any economic relief for hospitals and for physician fee schedules, not just lab. We've talked a lot about, SALSA and PAMA and lab cuts. There's other cuts to the physician fee schedule that are out there. So all of these things come into balance. So I think just for everyone, probably what makes it into that end of year legislative package, which will probably be announced, I think, the 23rd. So in a couple of days, maybe by the time people are listening to this podcast, that'll be known. And then from there, we'll see what that might also then kind of forecast how long the public health emergency will persist. I think most people are predicting it'll probably expire in April or sometime in the early to mid spring of this coming year, I should say.
Yeah, and I know there's been some talk that this probably wouldn't be the right time to end the public health emergency now, with this still being a pretty big season for respiratory viruses. And I've been hearing that, there's shortages of cold medicine and, the types of medications that we use for respiratory virus symptoms. So clearly there's still a lot going on with respiratory viruses. And we just interviewed Matt Binnegard, and we're talking about influenza, RSV, and COVID, but that'll probably start winding down in the coming month. And then I think it would make a little bit more sense to talk about ending the public health emergency.
Yes, I agree. And that's, as you look forward to 2023, beyond that, I do think the whole, there's been a real struggle with drug shortages. I think there's now over 100 medicines that are in short supply in the United States. Many of them are really critical just for routine care, things like child's Tylenol and also amoxicillin. And so a lot of this is there's going to be, I think, a reevaluation of how the federal government secures a sufficient supply of critical medications. Some of those, because as drugs, just like everything else, just like we don't want labs to be a commodity, as some of the drugs are no longer, as they become generic, and the margins drop, that means that there's pressure to be more efficient in their production, meaning fewer producers, right? Which then makes the supply chain more vulnerable to shortages. So, and so I think that's the next thing we'll see, I think, in the coming year. There's a lot of talk about, how does the federal government look at supply chain in healthcare? What are some of the protections to make sure that we don't run into these critical shortages? And we've had a number, and you look at just the last year, there was X-ray contrast, there's been a number of drugs. So I think that will all kind of play into, I think that's one thing people can really expect there to be a lot of dialogue at next year will be around supply chain and healthcare.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. And I think also workforce shortages are going to continue to be an issue. And that goes anywhere from, the people that are boots on the ground doing accessioning, doing testing, to oversight Ph.D. and M.D. lab directors and pathologists. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's one when you look at. So I think as we come through 2023, I think from my perspective will be, okay, the giant wave that was COVID, in terms of its just impact on all of us on healthcare, that piece will begin to recede, and it'll become more sort of, there won't be the big waves, there'll still be the waves hitting the shore, but it won't be this giant wave. But as it recedes, it's going to leave the landscape change. And I think one of the things that was a concern going in, but pre-COVID, there were long-range concerns around the healthcare workforce. Well, COVID has just, on the good side, it's accelerated a lot of things like virtual care. On the negative side, it has accelerated a lot of things like retirement and exodus of workforce from healthcare, which is, was something we're going to be contending with in spades in 2023, because the measures to address it, like automation, like AI and machine learning that can help with clinical decision support and even lab operations, those things are great, but they're not going to be available in 2023, almost certainly, right? So we're going to really be crushed. And not crushed, that's too negative, but then we're going to really be thinking creatively about how we maintain ourselves in the current state and move as we move to the future one.
Yeah, absolutely. Efficiency, thinking creatively, those are all going to be so important. We're seeing that in my lab with parasite testing. A lot of people have taken down the standard parasitology testing, sending them to our lab. That's great. But at the same time, that's a lot of volume. We have to think creatively, and we could talk about at some point in the future how we're going to be using digital pathology and artificial intelligence to help with that as a tool to help our technologists. And we have to think creatively about staffing. People don't want to work the midnight shift. Maybe there's a few out there, but most people don't. And, so the competition for people who can offer the Monday through Friday 9 to 5 shifts, everyone wants those jobs and not the other ones. Yeah, so we have to really think creatively and really reassess for the coming year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the two things I would say on the one hand is for our listeners is that particularly if you're in lab medicine, is to continue to internally to elevate concerns and engage in discussions as you can around your organizations, because they're feeling the pinch. I mean, just in Minnesota, we've had 2 impending nursing strikes that have been forestalled by salary increases at many of those hospitals. Again, that puts a pinch on other areas, so it's important to maintain your advocacy internally. And the other is that the reality is that lab medicine is one of the most heavily regulated areas of medical practice. And so I think for us to continue to stay engaged with regulators, because regulation, when you say that word, it doesn't automatically engender thoughts of creativity and flexibility, which means that we're going to have to continue to advocate no matter what happens with ballot or anything else. We're going to have to really stay engaged with FDA and regulators to make our point, because as a for instance, I think the FDA has stated that image analysis will be considered software as a medical device if it's being used for clinical decision support, meaning algorithms that might help us in diagnosis of cancer off of slides and things, or parasites or anything else. So I think really understanding that. The flip side is no matter what, I don't think FDA is, I know FDA, having had a conversation with them last week, they don't want to be seen as a group that's inhibiting innovation that's really going to be important for patients. They just want to make sure that it's safe and reliable. And so I think that's what the mindset going into 2023. I think the labs are going to have to really contend with being more engaged with regulators at the state and federal level, no matter what happens legislatively.
Totally agree, Bill. Makes sense. We have to stay engaged.
Yep.
Well, it'll be an interesting year, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm not going to predict if there'll be any new outbreaks or not. I'll just keep my fingers crossed that there won't be any new outbreaks. So we'll have to see how that goes. Yeah. Any other last predictions on your end with your
stress?
mobile without cutting yourself on the glass?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think honestly, the big thing is it's going to be a time of change. It's going to be more dynamic than we're used to. There's going to be a lot of societal stress. If you look just macroeconomically, there's still issues with disparities in healthcare that the COVID pandemic has illustrated both within our country and globally. There's going to almost certainly be tough economic times in 2023. Most people are predicting a recession as another byproduct of the ongoing pandemic impact and the government debt which was accrued during that time. All of that. So you say, what can I do, right? I think, and I think my own mantra has been, if I can't be the solution, I at least don't want to be part of the problem. And that means, I think just really treating people around you as you hope to be treated, right? I think every day thinking about something, in every moment if you can, but think about something that you're thankful for. And when you have someone in front of you and you're having a stressful day, just keep in mind they probably are having maybe even a more stressful day or worse. I have to keep that in mind when I'm driving. But in all seriousness, I think in our work to really try and be kind. We think about that this time of year, we hear bells ringing for Salvation Army and we think generously. Let's just try and be generous and kind, no matter where we are, right? I think when we're talking to providers in the lab, a lot of times there's going to be negative interactions. Look, they're stressed, you're stressed. The more that we can be kind to others, the more it's going to be reflected back on us. I just tweeted an article about this yesterday. I think that's true for healthcare. I think it's just true for society. So I think one thing is, one thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and wake up. I read St. Francis readings every morning to try and get myself grounded. But to be St. Francis was great about kindness and gratitude. So try and bring that forward in some small way in your days. That's my own personal commitment to 2023. So
I like that, Bill. I try to do that as well. Kindness and gratitude. And every morning I try to reflect on that, usually in my walk-in. I try not to just prepare for my day as I'm walking in, but to look around and just appreciate being outdoors and then reflecting on what I'm grateful for. Yeah. It's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, it is. It's a great way. And for me personally, 2023 should be the year that I move past having to have plastic teeth to something more permanent after my bike accident. So that'll be something to be thankful for too. But I should be thankful also for these teeth that I've had. So you didn't have to have a gap tooth conversation with me weekly for the past 20 months.
Bill, I'm just grateful that after such a crazy accident that you came out okay and that it was just a few teeth and not your whole face that got smashed. And so you're with us here and grateful for that.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for it too. And I'm grateful for you and for our podcast and for our ability to find time every week to share thoughts and ideas with each other and then with those who choose to listen to us. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I look forward to it every week. And yes, also very grateful to those that choose to be with us every week. So thanks to everyone and happy holidays. Wishing you all just a wonderful season with friends and family.
Couldn't say it better myself.
All right, until next time.
Until next time, until next year.
Next year.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Answers from the Lab. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and don't forget to tune in every Thursday and every other Tuesday.